Literary Festival 2021, the digital edition. Things are different this year, but we hope we can still bring you writers and books to intrigue, delight and enchant. And talking of enchanting books, it gives me great pleasure to be talking to Lia Leendertz today about her book, The Almanac, A Seasonal Guide, now in its new edition for 2022. Lia is an award-winning writer about gardening, growing food and cooking, and in her almanac, all of these come together. Lia, welcome to the festival.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a great pleasure. I'd like to start by asking you about your first knowledge of almanacs and experiences of them and what they meant to you. Did you always love them?
I always loved things like tide timetables and things like that. Whenever I went on holiday by the sea, I would always, buy those little booklets and things like that. So I had those, but to be honest, I didn't really have much of a knowledge of almanacs until I kind of decided to make one. And I kind of came at it from a slightly funny angle, which was I was sort of searching for a title for a book. As you said, I write about gardening and cookery, and I was trying to come up with what's going to be my next book. And I wanted to write something that was particularly about months and in the garden and in the kitchen and what's different and that kind of plot to plate sort of thing. And I was thinking, how can I kind of what title would be good for this? And the word that first came to me was the word month. I thought, oh, well, I'll make it about the months, and it's about January and everything that's in January. And then I sort of thought, month, it's not kind of, doesn't roll off the tongue, and I may even have, I can't quite remember, may even have picked up a thesaurus and looked up months, or looking for other words related to month, and came across the word almanac and thought, oh, that's a nice word. It was that sort of shallow at first, like, oh, that would make a nice title for a book. And I thought, oh, I could just sort of nick that and not make a real almanac, but I can just sort of steal it from my idea. And then started looking at what it was and what they are, and got really captured by the idea of actually making a real almanac. And of course, there are other almanacs available, have been for hundreds of thousands of years, actually. It's a very, very old form, one of the oldest forms of publishing. And there are still some around, like Old Moore's Almanac that has been published in Britain for hundreds of years. Yeah. So I started looking at those. And what I realized was that, though obviously that kind of pedigree of having come down from hundreds of years ago is amazing and incredible that they've managed to keep publishing all this time. What it did mean is that there are sort of some slightly odd hangovers. So for instance, they're kind of printed on quite cheap paper because they would have been sort of pamphletty and sold very cheaply to farmers or whatever. And they also quite full of adverts, which again would have come from the historical way that they would have been printed. But now it's like, well, do I want to be looking at all these adverts for, various bits and bobs of clothing and, all sorts of kitchen aids and stuff like that. And I kind of just started to think, oh, I feel like there might be, and also a big dependence on forecasting and premonition, and so what is such and such celebrity going to be doing next year? What is Michael McIntyre's year going to look like next year and stuff like that? And I kind of thought, yeah, that's not kind of what I want to know about the year ahead. I want to know about the moon and the stars and the tides and the food that you can eat each month. And so that was what made me start sort of looking and thinking, actually, perhaps there is a space here for another annual almanac. And so that's what I set about doing, kind of from scratch, not knowing at all what I was doing the first year, and threw it together.
Really fascinating, because I think very much like you, the first ones I knew about were things like Old Moors, and they were on that flimsy paper. And your book is, it's a book, it's not ephemeral, it's not disposable. Even though it's about next year, I can already see it's the kind of thing I'm going to keep coming back to, because it contains, there are so many things in it that are the things you always need to know about, or the things you always want to know about, birds and the recipes as well. I love those.
Yeah,
I love biscuit of the month. I mean, that's just
I know, it's a cheap shot, that one, wasn't it? Like, who's not going to fall for biscuit of the month?
I think what I did when I very first started was I did that thing that I think a lot of people do, which is I'm going to look at my birthday first. I'll look at my birthday. I do that with, you know, with yearbooks and things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really loved about it is that, so this is about, you know, folk traditions. I know, and that's the theme that I know that you chose because you talk about that in the introduction. And one of the things I thought was very interesting is that you start off thinking, oh, well, that's clearly going to be about English folk traditions, and then it isn't. And I love that because I felt what it was telling me was that it's something that connects all of us. It's not just about you know, Jack of the Green or, you know, the English folk tradition. It's about everything. One of the things I loved was right at the beginning in February when we're talking about red underwear for Chinese New Year. And I read that and I thought, that's an Italian thing as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Red under for Capodanno. So is that something that was that conscious that the things that you choose have an attraction to all nations or all you know, all cultures, or well, meant to be something that morphed into something else?
It's very much so. The kind of cultural scope, really, I've always set out as being, it's you know, geographically it's very much Britain and Ireland, but culturally it is the culture of everyone who lives within Britain and Ireland. So that's really what I've always done, is kind of set out to think, what are the major communities and what are their celebrations and what are they doing at different times of the year? And really it kind of ties into what I try to do all the way through, which is give as many different ways into celebrating and enjoying each moment in the year as I can think of. And, you know, well, February is a hard month to enjoy, but there is this massive, explosive celebration of Chinese New Year that now happens in quite a major scale in a huge number of cities throughout Britain and Ireland, in fact. So yeah, why would we not kind of celebrate it? So yeah, if somebody in Britain is celebrating it, then it's in, basically.
Brilliant.
How it goes. Yeah.
No, so how do you choose your themes? Have they all been themed, or is this was that not a thing you did at the start?
No, it wasn't a thing I did at the start, actually. In fact, the first two didn't really have a theme, and then the third one, hold on. Yes, I wanted to do a theme of the moon, and that just worked really nicely. And I think it kind of helps people to understand, you know, what's the point of me buying this again? I bought it last year. If I can say, okay, well, this time the theme is. So we had the moon was that theme, and then the following year was yes, so 2021. So where we are now is all about sort of travel and migration and pilgrimage as well. And then this coming year is going to be all about sort of folk traditions, but specifically kind of living folk traditions. So I really wanted to look at the points in the year where people gather together still. So not kind of historical ones that like, oh, people used to, I don't know, knock on the door and hop 3 times and, you know, all of that stuff. It's like, it has to be happening now. It has to happen year after year when we can, because obviously we've had a year and we've had 2 years where all of these wonderful seasonal cultural celebrations have not happened. So I felt like, well, there's a place for bigging these up and saying, you know, these are wonderful things, and let's get back, and hopefully, you know, if everything goes to plan, then we'll be able to celebrate them again. So it was kind of to remember those and celebrate them at home, so that they don't.
Yeah, one of the ones I particularly liked about that is in April, which is month, you talk about St George and the Paceseggers, and I spent a lot of my life in West Yorkshire.
Right.
Where in Hebden Bridge, where they have a Pacesetter play.
So you've seen this?
I have seen it many times. Yeah, people from
I haven't.
One of the people who's still in it, he's been playing the same character for about 40 years now.
Oh, wonderful.
Because he started as a schoolboy.
Oh, that's fabulous, isn't
Yeah,
it?
he always
And I
posts.
mean, and things like that, when you actually sort of look at the lineage and stuff, there'll be all sorts of people saying, oh, well, you know, it probably wasn't like this, and it's probably different. And I just sort of think it doesn't matter, you know, if it's been revived, if it stopped, and if it's come back, you know, it happens now, and it is people coming together to celebrate a particular moment in the year, to celebrate the seasons. And, you know, how can that not be a great thing to mark and to celebrate and to put on paper? So, and what was wonderful for my purposes is several of these celebrations have recipes attached to them and songs attached to them, because we always have songs in the Almanac, always have recipes. So I had this lovely kind of crossing together of things that go together. So that worked very nicely for me.
It's definitely one of the things that puts it so completely right up my street. You know, I love cooking. I love the natural world. I love folk tradition. I love, you know, comparative traditions around the world. I picked it up and I started going through it, and I thought, oh yes, I love that. And every page there was just another little thing that I really enjoy. I love tide tables, you know, the phase of the moon, and all of those things. And it feels like such a treat to have all the things I love in one place. And then,
well, that's really nice, because when I sort of made it, I kind of felt like I'm kind of making my version of an almanac. I'm making, you know, this is the things I want in it. I don't want, you know, all that other premonition stuff. I want this and this and this. So, and it's actually lovely to find that, you know, I'm not alone. There are lots of people like you that also love all of those same things. And,
yeah, and it feels very personal because it's all the things that one loves. So one of the things I did want to ask you was about the mechanics of it, how long it takes, and do you start off with something when you think, okay, I need to put this in, so I'm going to have to start thinking about where it's going to go, or do you think, well, this is my theme, and so now I'm going to go and find sources?
Yeah, how does it go? I think it's slightly different each time, and what's happened each time with having the themes is I've kind of known about the theme in the back of my head for quite a long time before I've come to write it. So I know what 2023 is going to be. And then I come, in fact, just last week, I thought I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write down everything I know about 2023. And it's kind of there. It's like, okay, I know, I already know. And it's been sort of working away. In fact, I actually, this is terrible. I actually know what 2024 is going to be as well.
That's wonderful.
So over time, I think somewhere in the back of my head, all these things are sort of filtering down. And then when it actually comes to do it, it's been quite, you know, I know, I say that, generally I don't actually know the content. I know the kind of thing I want to have in it. So, you know, I knew that I wanted folk traditions, but I didn't know what each one was going to be. But I had an idea that about the Halland Toe, which is the Cornish May Day thing. I would have loved to put in not the Green Man, what's it called, Jack in the Green, because that's a local thing that happens here in Bristol. But I've already written about that a little while ago, so I searched out. But I mean, there's so many things for May. I could have chosen all sorts of things, but so I kind of had that in mind. And Notting Hill, I kind of knew that I wanted to put Notting Hill in and to talk about those connections between the West Indies and Britain, and how that's celebrated, or not celebrated, but, you know, how that's marked there. And then had to sort of search around for the trickier. There are some months that are always trickier. Looking at July in particular, July is a real tricky one, because I think possibly it was just a very busy month. In the past, people were out in the fields and they were busy, and they were maybe making hay, and they were, you know, just keeping everything ticking along, and there wasn't time to stop and have lots of holidays and celebrations. You know, those things tend to happen in the pauses between seed sowing and haymaking and harvest and things like that. So July in particular is always one that is a bit of a sort of, I have to search around for folk traditions, because nobody was doing anything in July other than getting on with it. Am I answering the question? Sorry, let me get to the point. So then it all kind of fits in, and I generally don't know the actual meat of the stuff that I'm putting in until I start. I tend to, apart from the gardening, because I know quite a lot about gardening, most of the stuff that is in there I didn't know before I started. So it's lots and lots of research, and that just sort of keeps it interesting for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so what makes something special enough? Or is it just that it's interesting, or is it a combination of things?
Yeah, I suppose there's that thing of like, well, I don't know about this. I think it's like, I'm interested in this. I want to know about this. I like trying to find a real spread geographically, though there has been a kind of, for this one, quite a lot of sort of northwest stuff actually. So I don't know. Yeah, what makes it interesting? I think just that I'm interested in it, and just that I would like to know more, and that's kind of it, really.
Yeah. So that's very interesting though, because so often there might be something that just leaps out from nowhere. It's almost as though it just lands on your desk and you think, well, that's got to go in. That definitely has to go in. And then other times, as you say, particularly with with the leaner months, you're trying to find something, and then and so it's about the sort of pull between those two. There are some things that are always they're going to find their place.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
so. Yeah, some things are just like, wow, perfect, wonderful.
yes.
Stick those in, and then yeah, other things come a little bit trickier, but it's all good fun.
Do you have a favorite month, and does it change every time?
Well, I do have a favorite month, and actually it's become more so over making. I've always loved May. My birthday's in May, and I just love the kind of atmosphere of May. You're so sick of the cold and the dark by then, and and April can be March. Okay, you're sort of trying to fool yourself, it's spring. April can be lovely, but by May you genuinely start to take off your cardigan and go outside in a t-shirt, and it really does start to feel like summer. And then when I've started doing this, I mean, I'm talking about July being the lean month. May, I could write the whole book every year about May. There is so much, and I think it's because it's got all these sort of associations with fertility and with the starting of the year, and it was just a time that was very, just a very exciting time. If you were living in an agricultural society and your only heating was a few logs that you could get to get you through the year, well, May was really quite a special thing, and food starts to come in, and all sorts of things after very lean times. So May is full, absolutely packed full of folk traditions. I mean, songs, on the morning of May, there's so many folk songs. I could do a whole book on May. So for many reasons, including the fact that I just enjoy it, it's May, I'm afraid, which is a bit, yeah, I feel like I should pick a trickier month. It's too easy, isn't it, to enjoy May, but it should go for February.
I see February would be my favourite month because that's my birthday month.
Oh, right, is it? Well, February is I think for most people quite a hard month to enjoy, because it's we're like really, winter's gone on a bit now, and that'll do. But it has gorgeous things about it, because you really start to get that lengthening of the days, don't you? And that sense of like, oh, it's actually going to come to an end. And,
yes, you do.
That's what I'm trying to do, is appreciate every month and not just favour May.
Yes, it's when things start to, I mean, even though it can be fiercely cold, it is when things are starting to very, very slowly move into early spring.
Yes, and the bulbs will start to push up, and it's like, oh, even though it's cold, I love the way that nature just knows, even though it's freezing cold, whatever, it knows that the days are lengthening, and it knows that it's time to get on with it and to push on and start the project. So I love that.
No, it's lovely. So when we were talking earlier, and we were talking about how it feels personal, it's personal to you, but then it feels personal to me as well. Have you had a lot of feedback, particularly? I'm thinking, obviously, particularly, with the way that people have been at home, have the way that people have reacted to the book and responded to the book, to a previous edition. Do you think that's changed? Has it noticeably changed for you in the way that they talk to you about it and what it means to them?
Maybe it has become more personal. What's funny about it was, having written books previous to the Almanac that, let's say, didn't do as well as the Almanac does, you sort of get used to kind of, you know, you put a book out in the world and that's kind of it. You get a few people saying it's nice, but with the Almanac straight away, it had a very strong feedback element. Lots and lots of people have always, right from the first one, just sort of taken it off and done their own things with it, and that's been so lovely. As an author, it's just incredible to, you know, find that it's got this sort of life of its own once it's left me, and it goes off. And so you've got, I don't know, forest school groups using it, and somebody's recording themselves singing the songs every month, and you know, people are posting the biscuit or whatever the equivalent was then of the month on Instagram every month. So it's always had a really strong interactive element to it, which absolutely took me by surprise when it first started, and was absolutely gorgeous. And I suppose over the whole lockdown, that became just a much more personal thing, so it wasn't so much groups and things like that. But yeah, there's been a lot of people sort of saying that. I think particularly over that first kind of spell of lockdown where everything felt really frightening, actually, and you know, we were just sort of at sea a bit, and we were all kind of locked in our homes and all over Zoom, and obviously we still are a bit, but you know, it was very easy to lose your kind of moorings with the world outside. And a lot of people, loads and loads of people actually said to me how strongly they used it and leaned on it over that time to just to keep in touch with the seasons and with what was happening. And what was lovely actually was that this year has, with this theme of travel and movement, it's actually has been really nice during the lockdowns to know that, you know, while we are all having to stay very still and be very careful, the swifts are, you know, coming all the way up from Africa and coming to actually my street, and then flying all the way back down to Africa, and the whales are coming down from Svalbard and passing by the Fourth of Firth and heading to the Caribbean, and all this stuff is carrying on. The natural world is moving around and doing its thing, and it's all happening around us. Okay, we can't see it, but you know, we know that. Well, I could see the swifts, you know. So yeah, that was a nice little coincidence. That
yeah, I think that's part of the magic of it, actually, because it does take one out of, you know, the four walls that we're still to a certain extent very much bound by. I love the birds. One of the things I love most is about the birds. I mean, the drawings are absolutely spectacular.
They're beautiful, aren't they? This year, so
take a moment to talk about your wonderful illustrator, because which is Harry Brockway, and they're just gorgeous.
I know,
you know, the finest, most wonderful lino cuts, and I just love them. I mean, I love this one. So here is May, the beautiful May. Oh, that's not very clear. That's not going right, but it's a lovely, lovely image of you know,
Robin Hood.
Wonderful. So yes, and I love the birds, and you know, how knowing when they're going to arrive, that's something I'd never actually thought about before. You know, one thinks of the robin as being stereotypically a British bird, and you know, and then you find out that maybe they're not, you know, or maybe they go elsewhere. And think, oh, where are they going? Which I love. So one of my other things I wanted to ask you, actually, when we're moving on from the birds and that bit of the natural world, was about the tides and the sunsets and the sunrise times. I wanted to know why you chose Clitheroe or for the sunrise and sunset, or is it always there?
No, so we've changed things around a little bit this year, in that before I used to choose two spots, either one in the north and one in the south, or one in the east and one in the west, and we would do the numbers for the sunrise and sunset and moonrise and moonset and all of that. And then this year, actually, it was my daughter was looking through the Almanac. She loves the Almanac, but she's 13. And she said, "Oh, these pages are not for me, though." I said, "What do you mean they're not for you?" Well, what does that mean? And she said, "Oh, I can't understand." And I sort of thought, oh, that's a real shame. And it got me thinking. And I thought maybe I need to, just rethink the way we're doing that. I'd always loved having, like you, I love timetables. So I loved having that as columns of numbers. But actually, if those are putting off a lot of people, but maybe we can do them visually. So in doing them visually, they just had to be simplified, but you had to slightly lose some of that nerdy detail that was in it before. And they did have to be simplified. So I lost the ability to do one north, one south. So Clitheroe, I picked because it was just about somewhere in the middle, and that's why. And I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna continue that, because I do like to choose somewhere different each time. But that is why Clitheroe, sort of roughly. I think I put in what was the centre, and then found the nearest place that I could find those figures for. So that's all.
I think Clitheroe. I was confirmed in Clitheroe, of all places. Because it's near to where I went to school and things. So that was why it caught my attention. I thought, right. It's an interesting place to choose. But I liked it very much, very much.
It's just quite nice as well. I mean, I've had people get in contact before when I've done the temperatures around the coast and things like that different each time, and someone will suddenly get in contact and say, "Oh, you've just done my little local port," or whatever, and people like it. So I try and change them each time so that different people get a little thrill out of it.
Lovely. And I think I asked at the very beginning about how whether some of the connections are deliberate or accidental, or just happen because they happen, because that's the mystery of the world sometimes. And do people get in touch with you and say, "You wrote about this, and there's this thing as well, and I need to put them together, and did you know about this?" Because I get very excited by that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that that's happened that much, actually. No, but they're very welcome to. And I have had requests for certain places to be put in. I think it was somebody having a I think because I live in Bristol, and have mostly lived around the West Coast, I lean towards the West quite strongly, and somebody did correct me on that, pull me up, and I thought, okay, I need to take a bit more notice of the East Coast and do that. So no, I've had a little complaint of that, and but no, not so much actually. The other thing,
because one of the ones that really struck me was the song in December, which is the Wren song. And I'm not going to sing it. But one of my favorite books is The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper. I read it when I was a child. It's still one of my great favorites. And in that, there is a bit where they are singing the Wren song on Boxing Day.
There? I didn't know that. I haven't read it, actually. I've always meant to.
Yeah. Well, I reread it recently. Robert Macfarlane, not Robert Macfarlane, he's the naturalist person. It was somebody else, I can't remember who it was saying, let's do a Twitter read through a few years ago. So we did, and so it's in my mind because I've read it relatively recently. But yeah, and I sort of landed on that page and thought, that's just my world all clicking into
place. That's lovely. That's nice.
Let's very much of it. I love it. I just love it. I love the bits that are called dressing up, because they are about dressing up and costume, and
they are, yeah,
lightening and lightening the days when it's winter, and shining with the glory of summer when it's the summer.
I sort of went through, like, what do I call this? Do I call this folklore or living folk? It was all getting a bit complicated. I thought, no, this is dressing up. It's dressing up. Let's keep it simple. That's what it is. So,
yeah. So when we're talking about the folk stories, somebody was saying the one about Herne the Hunter, for example. I mean, the Herne the Hunter is a massive tradition, lots and lots of stories about him. How difficult is it to cut that down, or to sort of digest it into the amount that you want to say?
Yeah.
How do you pick out the good bits?
Yeah, very tricky. I quite like writing small. Luckily, my background is in journalism, so I've always sort of written quite tight, and also have an editor that wasn't afraid to do lots of slashing. I did overwrite for this one particular, and it's so hard because, and then people say to me, this is your 5th one, how did you? I overwrote by, I can't even remember how much, thousands of words this time. And, you know, and several of my friends are like, how, you know, you're 5 years in, surely you know how long it is by now. But the trouble is, because I'm researching everything fresh, I've got all this stuff and I've got this whole story and I'm trying to put it in, and, you know, so, you know, no, I just try and write it as tight as possible. And, you know, there's not much space, but it's deliberately small and cheap, and, you know, it's got to be that size. It's got to not get too much bigger, because it is what it is. It's a little stocking fillery kind of
pocket.
Yes, exactly. It's got to be able to pocket in a generous pocket.
Yeah,
so, no, it's really hard because I get tons and tons of information and then I want to put it all in, but good editing.
Yes, and you need a chapter that says, tell me everything you know about Robin Hood.
Yes, exactly, and then squeeze it in.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the other things I really love about it, actually, because somebody like Robin Hood, it's still going to, and people will think they know lots about Robin Hood because of reading or because of seeing films, and then they'll read this story and they'll think, well, I didn't know that. So even when it's something you think you know about, it's still going to be new.
Yeah, that was really lovely finding that out about, because like, how do we have the stories about Robin Hood? And it's come down through this tradition of medieval May games, which then sort of turned into Mummers plays and Morris dancing, and then Robin Hood sort of vanished from the picture. And then you've got several of these traditions that ended up in the book that have Maid Marian, but no Robin Hood, which is quite strange. So he sort of vanished over the years, and she stayed usually as a man in drag, actually, Maid Marian in much of these folk traditions. But it's kind of funny to see, and then to actually track down, well, what was one of these stories that was told at the May Games, and be able to tell it was really lovely, because I don't think most people would. Yeah, it's really fun.
Lovely. So as a gardening and a cookery writer, are they the easiest bits for you to do you think, or are they actually more difficult because you want to present the best of the things that you know?
The gardening is easy. It's just sort of, with the gardening, trying to find a different kind of way of presenting it, and different angles, different things to give each year. In fact, I'm going to find it tricky next year, because I did Gardening by the Moon this year, and I've always put in Gardening by the Moon dates, but I haven't sort of expanded on it and really gone into detail. And actually, I think it's what people really want. So from the feedback that I've had, so it's got all the stuff to do each month for 2022, whether or not you're gardening by the moon, but it's also got them lumped into, you know, if you want to do it gardening by the moon, then do this time, this time. And I might struggle to improve upon that, actually. I'll have to really think about how to put it all the next year. And the cookery is actually, I leave the food until quite late, because I like to have all the other stuff in place. So really the kind of the folklore stuff usually goes in first, and I try and write that, then probably the nature stuff, and see if I can connect that in any way or not. And then the cookery tends to be a sort of pulling together thing. It will, you know, it might refer to something in the garden, or it might refer to a celebration that I've mentioned, or, you know, it sort of tends to be what the glue, I think. So I really enjoy kind of getting everything else in place, and then searching for recipes that are going to, you know, either be old recipes or seasonal recipes that bring make the whole thing feel more like a nice complete whole.
Yes, I'm looking forward very much to Biscuit of the Month. I think I'm probably going to start early.
Very good. Somebody told me the other day they'd just done the September's one. I thought, you're ahead.
I just need some hazelnuts and I'm there.
There you go.
And they look like the kinds of biscuits that you want to have by you for this kind of weather.
Yes, very much. It's a hazelnut OT sort of crunch thing, isn't it? Yes. And some of them are like that, the biscuits of the month. Some of them are just sort of seasonal, nice things to use up the produce. And then several of them are traditional ones that fit in. So I've got Cavallucci di Siena for Twelfth Night, which is a very old recipe for an Italian 12th night biscuit for January. And then fortune cookies for Chinese New Year, and Easter biscuits with cassia oil for Easter, and actually coming up Thar cakes, which is another northern one actually for All Souls Day in November, which is a very kind of dark black treacle and lots of spices and oats and very kind of serious All Souls Day kind of a biscuit. Serious.
serious biscuit to gird you for the winter months.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I really wanted to ask you was, do you have one little thing that you always put in, like one little fact or something? You don't have to say what it is if you want it to carry on being a secret or something for people to spot, but a bit like when people used to make mixtapes, there'd be sometimes one song that would always go on a mixtape. Do you have something like that, a little secret Easter egg to look for?
The thing that's popping into my mind is that we have, so on the first cover, this is the cover of the very first one. I don't know how well you can
Oh yes,
see.
that works well. Yeah.
When we were talking about, we were looking at the images, and I said to my editor at the time, so I'm not too sure about the sheep. And he said, I've got a theory that books with animals on the cover sell more. And I went, okay, we'll keep the sheep. And so we always have an animal or a bird. So we've got a pig, 2019.
Yeah.
We've got dormouse in 2020. We've got beautiful a hare, 2021, and then we've got birds for 2022. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head.
That's a good one, though. I like that. Thank you.
A little there has to be a creature of some sort on the cover. That's a little lucky charm.
I love it. I think that's a pretty good plan, actually. Yeah.
There you go. There's my top tip for all authors: put an animal on your cover.
Put an animal on the front. So you're saying you've got your next two, the ideas for them already there. How long is it going to take you, do you think, to actually pull them all together? I mean, do you start that now, or have you already?
Yeah, starting the kind of back processes of it now. So a bit of vague planning. The next stage of it is just making sure, because I've got various contacts and people and licenses to track down so that I can reproduce stuff and all of that. So all of that stuff is the kind of the boring back end stuff of it that once I know I've got that in place, I can kind of relax and just so that's kind of the next bit. And contributors, so I'm starting to think about if I want any contributors and who they might be in contact, so all of that. And then really probably I tend to write it in about 4 months, quite intensively, sort of try and put all other work to one side and just write it quite intensively and drive my husband up the wall because I sort of vanish from the house and the kids are like, who are you? And just sort of get my head. I always every year say, right, this year I'm going to write it through the whole year. I'll write May and May, and I'll write October and October, and hasn't happened yet, but yeah, maybe it will one day. It would be nice, but somehow it sort of seems to work doing it like that. If I've got all that, I couldn't do all the boring bits as well in that time, but if I've got all of those in place and I can just sort of, once that stuff's ready, I can just sort of throw it onto the page and it's done.
well, I will be looking forward to it. But of course, I've still got all of next year to go through with your wonderful book, and I've enjoyed the little bits that I've looked at so far. But I'm really looking forward to getting very much more into the depth and the detail of it, because you know, as I say, it really is a little treasure house.
Oh, thank you.
You know, it's full of lovely things. It's visually very beautiful,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, and it's funny, and I think it does all of those things. It tells you things you want to know, it tells you things you need to know, and it tells you things you should know.
Oh, that's lovely.
It meets, it ticks every box for me, really meets.
That's so nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for talking to me today. I've really enjoyed it. And I recommend everybody, you need to go and buy this, because it will just improve your year no end.
Thank you so much for having me.